your class?
You know, when I was doing the bios, I hadn't known that you were so long back. So were you around 83? He was
Yeah,
83.
83.
Oh, you were in 83.
So it's Jim and Glenn Morris.
Glenn Morris, I know. Glenn Morris came after the talk.
Glenn and I were coaching called the Third World Coalition. He was the president of Inner Students and Balsa. Also, so we had all this, we created something called the Third World Coalition. We really, and you can imagine Glenn, he was pretty progressive.
I know. Well, by the time we had a girl that came out of the college collective too. So by the time I was
Just a quick at a time.
well, I'm sorry that I didn't do that.
Yeah, take you back here. We even asked if the airlines.
Look him up every once in a while, and see what he's doing. Students.
But we got
I'm not. We have another council member that's going to be here.
You're much younger.
So I think you started to and then through the cut and all this alphabetical. That's every
That's just.
Okay, great.
All right, if I could have folks' attention, the pleasure I have here is also a tease for me, which is I get to tell you all what a treat you're in for, and then don't have the time on my schedule to actually take it in myself. This is really a treat, and first, the context. We were very happy to host the Colorado Commission on Indian Affairs. I think it was right around this time last year, right, Lieutenant Governor? Same time. And I believe it was Terry Knight who was there who said, you know, there is such a rich history of the Utes, and it has not been told or appreciated enough for its context and for what it means going forward. And at that point, the director of our American Indian Law Program, Kristen Carpenter, said, well, we should have a conference on that. And Kristen, as anyone here who's gotten to know her knows, she is not a talker, she's a doer. And she is running our American Indian Law Program, and what has happened this year under her leadership is spectacular. We had an earlier talk on sovereignty by Jim Anaya, who, as it turns out, was a law school classmate of our Lieutenant Governor, which means we have to try to get him back and let you know next time. And that talk on sovereignty literally packed the house, because for Native Americans, sovereignty is not only an academic issue, although they appreciate academic articles by Sarah Krakoff and others on the topic, because obviously those articles influence the future of the law. But it's a real important foundation of self-governance. And obviously I can't be in this building talking about American Indian law and not honor David Getch's, whose legacy in that area, obviously United States versus Washington being one of the seminal decisions, was something really special. And many of you are here. I got the pleasure of working with John Echohawk, Charles Wilkinson, and others to put together memorial service for David. And the moving tributes to his leadership in American Indian law stay with us. And David's legacy stays with us. And what we have now at Colorado Law is really our A game in terms of preserving David's legacy. What's happened is because David was so special, a lot of people were able to, let's say, be willing to ride along on his leadership in our American Indian law and energy, environment, natural resources area. With David passing away, what is required us to do is all step in, pitch up, and step up to do more and do it better in the very best tradition he set forth. And so what that means in American Indian law is that Kristen's leadership and what we've seen this year is only the beginning. We are so happy to have Carla Fredericks, who's now at Columbia, but through a constellation of extraordinarily fortunate circumstances, is joining us. And next year, Kristen and Carla will be a dream team in what we'll be doing in this area. We also have a newly named Getch's Wilkinson Center for Natural Resources, Energy, Environment. And obviously, issues involving Indian tribes and natural resources are ones that are deep, complicated, and of long vintage. We have the director of that newly named center, Brad Udall, here. Brad cares deeply about these issues, and we're going to certainly look at the partnership opportunities with many of you as we continue to explore them. We believe we can be an area for thought leadership, for trusted convening, and partnership with all those who care about Native Americans and the issues confronting them. We're so happy to have the Lieutenant Governor here. He really does deeply care. His leadership is spectacular. And what this proves to you is when you guys have other commission meetings and you invite us, be careful what you suggest, because we might do it. I also have to say, our commitment to educating the next generation of Native Americans going to law school is something that, again, is a important foundation for us. There was a time when Tom Fredericks was here that there were very few Native Americans who were lawyers. So Tom, John Eckelhawk, you guys could get together for dinner and have a, get together of pretty much all the American Indians who were, all the Native Americans practicing American Indian law, because it was a small group. That was 40 years ago. We've come a long way, and just to give you a number, Kristen gave it to me, we're now looking at recruiting 25, prospective Native Americans to come to law school here. And this recruiting effort that Kristen leads up is a serious operation, because we don't think there's a better place in the country to study American Indian law than University of Colorado. Having NARFIR is obviously a part of our strategic advantage. We're very appreciative of that partnership. Having a state government with a commission that cares, having a number of tribes, and also being a little like the thought of NARF, viewed as a neutral, if you will, that there are different tribes in different states that have their own, particular perspective, but we try to be supportive of all the tribes and the common interests. And that's something that's very important, that there be a place for the common interests of tribes to come together. Today we're going to talk about specifically the Ute tribal history, and as I've learned, there are three different, I'm not sure what the right metaphor here is, but units that have common ancestry. The northern Utes, who actually are our neighbors in Utah, the Mountain Utes, and the southern Utes, both of whom are Colorado-based. And I don't know if this is the first time we're coming together to talk about the history, but it won't be the last time. We want to honor, build on this relationship. It's really important to understand history. I understand from Kristen that in the Native American world, it's really, really important to understand history, and that the lessons of history are ones that deserve our respect and attention. And as we educate the next generation, it's very important that we are mindful of the history and that we learn from it. And I have to tell you, of the things we do at the law school, the community engagement piece and the training the next generation brings together the very core of our mission. So without me taking up any more time, I really want to introduce Kristen, who's really the driving force behind this, and acknowledge her leadership. So, Kristen Carpenter.
Thank you, Phil, and good morning. And for those of you who know Phil, you know that he's really the driving force behind everything that occurs at the law school, and his energy and enthusiasm and inspiration has really encouraged us to take our Indian law program up to a more energetic and engaged level. I do want to get right to our first panel, because we're so honored to have you all here, with just a couple of thank yous specifically. First of all, thank you to the tribes and the tribal leadership. When we cooked up this idea of having a conference, we were so grateful that you all were receptive and reviewed agendas and were willing to come and send your members and leaders. And I'll introduce you specifically, but thank you generally to you and to the Lieutenant Governor and the state leadership as well. We will have, in addition to the folks you see up here, judges and a state senator and leading attorneys in the community, and it's really a terrific agenda, along with the academic expertise of the faculty and the student enthusiasm. We're hoping to have a great conversation. Along the lines of thank yous, I have to start not only with our dean, but specific students. Jacqueline Jampolsky, who's our American Indian Law Program fellow, has worked with me at every single step. We were texting each other last night when I was at Target, and she was telling me, we need this, we need that. And so it's truly been a team effort to put everything together. Kelsey Peterson is a 1L in our NALSA organization, who's also been tremendously helpful in all of our NALSA students. And thanks to lots of folks folks in the community who helped us plan the agenda: Troy Ide, John Echohawk, Ernest House, Tom Fredericks, Monty Mills, Peter Ortego, Jeremy Patterson, and others for responding to my many emails and calls and giving us good expertise as we tried to create an inspiring event. And so I'm honored to introduce our speakers and turn it over to them. I will give each just a brief introduction. These are truly distinguished leaders, and I can't do their backgrounds full justice now, and I want you to hear from them. In our conference book, we have biographies of most, but not all of our speakers, but you can refer to those for even more information. To start, and I'll go alphabetically, Irene Cuch is the chairwoman of the Ute Indian tribe of the Uintah and Ouray Reservation in Utah. Chairwoman Cuch has served on the council for 14 years. She's a longtime leader in business and economic development on the reservation, and she holds many national leadership posts as well. Joe Garcia is the Lieutenant Governor of the state of Colorado, as well as the chair of the Colorado Commission on Indian Affairs. The Lieutenant Governor has a deep background in education issues, having previously served as the president of Colorado State University Pueblo, and before that of Pikes Peak Community College. Gary Hayes is the chairman of the Ute Mountain Ute Indian Tribe in Colorado. Chairman Hayes served for 25 years in the U.S. Navy, including 11 years of sea time, receiving numerous decorations. He returned home to Ute Mountain and was elected to the Tribal Council in 2006 and to the chairmanship in 2010. Jimmy Newton, the chairman of the Southern Ute Indian Tribe, was unable to join us at the last moment, and we are very grateful to Councilwoman Ramona Eagle for giving remarks on behalf of the Southern Ute Tribe. Ms. Eagle is the treasurer of the Southern Ute Indian Tribe and a longtime leader in the community and very knowledgeable about the history and culture of that tribe. I will turn it over to each speaker to give about 12 or 15 minutes of prepared remarks, and then we'll do some Q&A at the end. So, Chairwoman Cuch, thank you.
Can you hear me? Okay. Well, excuse me, Mike Atawujkut means greetings and good morning to all of you here. I'm very honored to be one of the speakers here, along with my sister tribes, the chairman Gary Hayes, and also Jimmy Newton. I guess he's not going to be here, but Ramona Eagle, I know them very well. Ira, that I'm here joining them to make this presentation, and thank you for asking me to be here on behalf of the Ute Indian Tribe. I know we're called Northern Ute, but I think it's to distinguish our tribe from the other two tribes. So really, we are the Ute tribe, and from the Uintah and Ouray Indian Reservation, which is located at Fort Duchesne, Utah. So we're located northeastern part of the state of Utah. Again, my name is Irene Cuch. I am the chairwoman of the Ute Indian Tribe of the Uintah and Ouray Indian Reservation, which is located in eastern Utah. But before I start, I would like to acknowledge Lieutenant Joe Garcia to be here with you. And also, I know I'm not here alone representing my tribe. I'd like to also introduce our Public Relations Director, Robert Colrow, sitting back there. And also have here with me our tribal attorneys, Jeremy Patterson and Tom Fredericks from the Frederick Peebles and Morgan's law firm, and also have our water engineer here with us, Dr. Wohl. So, and I believe that's from the Ute tribe that are here. So, Although we are spread all over 2 different states, the 3 Ute tribes are united by our common history, our culture, and most importantly, our language. And I think our language is very important. That's what makes us Nuchu, if we speak our language, and to preserve our language. So, and if we do not preserve our language, we're gonna lose it within so many years. But I speak my language, and I believe it's something we need to carry on into the future. By the way of background, the Ute Indian tribe is made up of 3 bands. The Uintah, and I might elaborate a little bit on Uintah band. The Uintah band originally came from the area of Salt Lake City and Heber Valley. The Uintah bands were in that area along with some bands from the Paiutes until we were moved over into where we're at, northeastern part. And the White River Band, they came from the state of Colorado. They were in the Meeker area. And they were removed also. And the Uncompahgre Utes were in the area of Delta, Colorado. And they were also moved and placed with the Uintah band right there in the area we call the Uintah and Ouray Indian Reservation, which was established back in 1861 by President Lincoln. So the 3 bands make up the Ute Indian tribe. The 3 bands still exist today. We still use a band system in our elections. Right now, elections are going on. So 2 members are elected to the business committee from each band, but they're staggered. Elections are held every 2 years, but the term of office is 4 years. So right now, elections for 3 members of the tribal business committee are going on now. We won't know until April 24th who the winners will be. And I am one of them that's running for re-election. So. The land of Colorado was made up of rich forests, abundant game herds, which provided a homeland in and around Rocky Mountains for the Ute people. In many parts of Colorado, the White River Uncompahgre bands lived here from time immemorial, and in some areas, they are only band whose ancestral homeland includes certain areas, as I stated, such as the Yampa Valley, which is a present day of White River National Forest. Not too long ago, I believe it was in December, one of the trees that were selected to be taken to Washington, D.C., I believe there were 2 of them, or one, if I can recall, the Ute tribe, White River band especially, because they were the ones that came from the White River National, they were in Yampa Valley, so they were invited. We were all, in fact, all 3 tribes were invited to be out there for the celebration of that Christmas tree. It was a national Christmas tree. So we were honored by them picking a tree from the White River National Forest that they took back to Washington, D.C. So we were there present to be part of that celebration, the Christmas tree celebration. It was because of this shared history that the Ute tribe has sought to reacquire lands within the state of Colorado and to restore tribal hunting and fishing privileges from the state, and were guaranteed under early treaties with the Ute people, such as the Brunot Agreement. We called upon the Colorado governor, lieutenant governor, to fully consider the tribe's request with respect to both of these matters. In the state of Colorado, is sincere in its commitment to maintain strong and respectful relations with the Ute people. As the 2009 Colorado Joint Senate resolution has committed to do, the state should begin by starting a new chapter in our shared history as people and allow those members of the Ute tribe that were wrongfully displaced from their homelands to restore their land and privileges in the state of Colorado. The Colorado Commission on Indian Affairs stands as an example of the strong partnership that can be achieved between tribes and states to address issues of common concern and interest. However, it is paramount importance. The Commission recognizes and addresses the historical wrongs that has been committed against the Ute people, not just that currently reside in Colorado. I want to thank the Professor Carpenter and the University of Colorado Law School American Indian Law Program for hosting this conference and recognizing the Ute Indian tribe's effort to contribute to the discussion about the past, present, and future of the Ute tribe's Toya. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman. It is a pleasure, really, to work alongside you and the other representatives from the other Ute tribes, the Ute bands here in Colorado. I'm Joe Garcia, and I am the Lieutenant Governor, and a lot of folks wonder, well, what does a Lieutenant Governor do? That's the first thing my kids asked me anyway when got elected. I mean, Lieutenant Governors are generally, by and large, fairly invisible, fairly low profile, and when I talk to other Lieutenant Governors, they kind of they say that, you know, the main thing they do when they get up in the morning is find out if the governor is still breathing, and if he is, they kind of go back to bed. Here in Colorado, I'm very fortunate to have one specific statutory duty that I was excited about coming in, and that is that I chair the Colorado Commission on Indian Affairs. I was excited about that when I came in because in my background, I have a history of sort of, my personal history is my family's from northern New Mexico, southern Colorado, so we've grown up in and around Indian country. My mother was born in Dulce, which is the, at the time, the Indian agent town for the Hickory Apache Reservation. And her grandfather originally homesteaded there, adjacent to the reservation, because he was in charge of running the herds of cattle and sheep for the Indian agent in town. Now, a lot of course, you know, Spanish and Native Americans have intermarried over the years, and so if you're in northern New Mexico and you visit any of the tribal lands, you'll see that most of the Native Americans there don't have what we think of as traditional Native American names. They have Hispanic surnames. And so I have relatives who live on the Ouray, formerly the San Juan Indian Reservation just outside of Española, New Mexico, where my folks grew up. And then I did some of my growing up in the interior of Alaska and had the opportunity to get to know a whole different kind of group of Native Americans with, in some ways, very different issues, but in some ways very similar issues. People who had been dispossessed, people who did not have the historical lands that had been part of their bands or their tribes, and then were in some ways really destitute, but were beginning to discover that there were natural resources on the lands just almost by accident. The U.S. government certainly didn't intend to give any of these tribes lands that had any value, but by accident they did. And so some of these tribes have done well, some, again, just by accident of where they ended up, have not. Now the Dean, and I want to thank the Dean for putting this on, for following through with what came up as an idea just a year ago, and I want to thank you, Professor Carpenter, for what you're doing here. I think it's just incredible. And CU Law School in general for its support of students, and particularly of Native American students who want to address the very key issues that impact Native Americans and their tribes and their lands. So I want to thank you. I also want to acknowledge one person who's just particularly important to me and important to Colorado. He's a young man, and yet he has just made an enormous impact, and that's, of course, the executive secretary, now the executive director of our Colorado Commission on Indian Affairs, and that's Ernest House. Ernest is a member of the Ute Mountain Tribe. His father was a former tribal chair, and his grandfather was the last hereditary chief of the Ute Mountain Utes. And he is a young man who has really dedicated his professional life to doing everything he can to help not just Ute Mountain Utes, but really all of the Ute bands, and in fact, all of Native Americans within Colorado. So the Commission on Indian Affairs, let me talk a little bit about that. Because we really have a statutory responsibility to work with the two recognized tribes here in Colorado, and that's the Southern Utes and the Ute Mountain Utes. And just by coincidence, I do have connection to the Southern Utes as well, again, because on my mother's side, by marriage, we married into the Southern Ute tribe a couple of generations back. So it's always been an issue of importance in my family. But when the dean mentioned we have these two tribes that are in the state and Northern Utes who are in Utah, it's really, Northern Utes, really all of the Ute bands originally covered a significant amount of Colorado territory and were really driven out. First, they were driven into a smaller and smaller and smaller corner in southwestern Colorado. Northern Utes completely dispossessed and pushed into Utah, but their historical connections to Colorado are very, very deep and very broad, and again, not just in southwestern Colorado. But we all know what has happened over the years, and we've seen that the tribes have been pushed into very small territories, and really we've seen a disbursement of people who are members of those tribes. So if you look at both of those tribes, and Colorado's not known, I think people don't realize how many Native Americans we have, and they don't compare us, for example, to New Mexico or Arizona or Alaska. But we have these two tribes, but they both have fewer than 3,000 enrolled members. But the Southern Utes have a pretty extensive or valuable resources, and the Ute Mountain Utes also have some really important, first they have big territory, but also very historically and culturally significant territory that many folks aren't aware of. But they are important partners here in Colorado. The Southern Utes and the Ute Mountain Utes really are economic engines in southwestern Colorado. There's not a lot of other things going on. They provide a lot of the economic development, a lot of the jobs, a lot of the opportunity, not just for tribal members, but for other folks in southwestern Colorado. Now, the Commission on Indian Affairs is charged to work with these two tribes, but we also recognize that if you just wander the streets in Denver, you see we have a lot more Native Americans from a lot of different tribes who are here in Colorado, and they've come from different tribes at different times and for different reasons. But the Colorado Commission on Indian Affairs has never been terribly active in working with other tribes, other Indians who are not members of the Southern Ute or the Ute Mountain Utes, and that's something we're trying to change as well. And with Ernest's help, we've had listening sessions in Denver. We plan more in the future. We've brought, and these are to really try to address the needs of urban Indians. And the urban Indians in Colorado greatly outnumber the Indians who live on the reservation lands. But it does not mean they don't have significant needs and significant things that we can do to help and should be doing. But what's key about CCIA and the way we work with the tribes is that we have a government-to-government relationship. It's not like we're a state agency that's working to help a population for no particular reason other than they need help. It is simply that we understand that these are sovereign nations that exist within the boundaries of the United States. And I think that's one of the things all of you studying Native American law really need to focus on. That is such a key foundational concept, and yet it's a little bit confusing to most of us because we don't think of sovereign governments existing within our boundaries. And it doesn't really happen anywhere else internationally that I know of. But it's a really key component here. So when the tribes come to meet with the government, or with the state government, or with the federal government, they do it as leaders of their people, of their nation. So just recently, we had our tribal chairs meet with Governor Hickenlooper to talk about issues that were of concern to the tribes and things that should be of interest to the state. But it wasn't like one group is at this level and the other government is at this level. They come in as peers to talk about issues that reflect the needs, that address the needs of people who live within Colorado's boundaries, but also live within the boundaries of the reservations. That's really very important. And we often have to be reminded of that if we don't come from that kind of a background. We also have to be reminded, and this happens at commission meetings regularly, of the history of the tribes in this state. When I first went to a commission meeting, I thought, man, these things take forever. No one ever speaks briefly. But it's because people really want to establish a historical context. And telling that story really is important. And listening to that story is even more important. We have to understand the perspective of tribal people within the state if we want to work with them. And I think the Commission on Indian Affairs has done that reasonably well. But it hasn't changed much in decades. And when the statute that created the Colorado Commission on Indian Affairs was passed some 37 years ago, really nothing had changed much. But this year, working with the tribes and with Ernest's leadership, we really decided, let's look at the statute that established the Colorado Commission on Indian Affairs and figure out how do we make it more effective? Do we have the right people on it? Are they serving, very technical things, are the terms the right length? What are the issues and who ought to be involved? And so we've the governor just a couple of weeks ago signed into law a modification of the statute that established the Colorado Commission on Indian Affairs and set some new ground rules that I think are very important. And we're looking forward to making more progress. Now, who's on this, on the commission? It's important to understand that, of course, we have tribal leadership, so we have tribal chairs and council members, but we also have cabinet members who work with the executive branch of government. So we have folks who are represented from Colorado Department of Transportation, Colorado Department of Natural Resources, Colorado Department of Education, because we realize, and Colorado Department of Social Services, and healthcare and public policy. These are important agencies that really work with tribes and tribal members to meet the needs of the tribes and the obligations of the state. By bringing these folks together at a regular meeting, we're able to talk about, well, what are the needs and what is the role the state government can play? And what are the roles that what are the roles the tribes can play in helping the state? Because it's not one way. It's not a matter of the state simply saying, we want to help you tribes. It's tribes saying, we want to help you state. We control, for example, significant water resources. We have other significant natural resources, and again, we are economic engines in a part of the state that's frankly not doing well economically. So the tribes have really reached out to try to help the state be more successful. Now, one of the other things I do in my role as Lieutenant Governor is I work a lot on education issues. And one of the things that I focus on very much is educational disparities. I think people in this room understand that we have significant educational attainment gaps for people who are Native American. A much lower rate of high school graduation, a much lower rate of college enrollment, and certainly a much lower degree attainment rate, and very few who move on to professional schools like law schools. That's something we need to be very focused on and we need to change. Now, when I went to law school, and it was with Jim and I, other folks who have gone on to become either successful and prominent academics, some who have gone on just to be troublemakers all around. That's what we did. We were Glenn Morris and I, some of you may know Glenn, we were co-chairs of something called the Third World Coalition. And we worked with the Native American law students, the Latino law students, African American law students, Asian law students, and even a very small Palestinian law student organization. And some people on campus, and our dean would I think say all we did was raise hell, but we thought that what we did was really try to bring focus to the need to educating more law students of color who could go back into their communities and make a significant difference. And I trust that, I hope that that's what all of you are doing as well. It's great that you're here, but it's not enough. It's important that you graduate. It's important that you support others coming into the profession and that you really help each other to survive. Frankly, I would not have survived law school but for my colleagues in the Latino Law Student Organization and the Third World Coalition, where we really encouraged each other to soldier on, to finish those degrees and to go out and do something useful. So I really want to encourage you to do that. And then I want you to think about the challenges we face, whether you grew up in Indian country or you grew up in an urban area. You know there are Native American young people everywhere who are struggling to finish school, not because they're incapable, but sometimes because they don't quite see the point, and maybe they're not encouraged by their teachers. You have the ability to encourage them and support them, and I really want you to do that. We're trying to figure out ways through CCIA to get more student interns to work with Ernest to help us make progress. If you're aware of folks who would like to work with the Commission on Indian Affairs, please send them our way. Work with, I know my daughter spent, she was a recent graduate of law school, but spent 2 winter terms here in Boulder working with NARF and had a great experience. I think those are important things for all of you to do, and I want to encourage you to do that. But I also don't want you to lose sight of your history, of our shared history. Native Americans in this state and in this country, of course, play a significant role in so many ways, and yet are often overlooked and often not well respected. Their historical rights, their historical claims in our country have not been recognized, and I think now with the help of Native American lawyers and others who are allies, it's changing, and we're making great progress, and I am just very fortunate to have the opportunity to work with these tribal leaders who are so committed to helping their people and helping the state. So I'm pleased to be here, to be a part of this. It really is exciting for me, although I'm not well qualified really to be a speaker here. I should be here just to listen to the rest of the speakers, all of whom have impressive backgrounds in law. And I just want to thank CU again for making this possible. Thank you.
Good morning. Mike Nuchu. It's good to see you guys this morning here. First, I want to thank the University of Colorado, Professor Carpenter, for putting this on. It would be great to see some judges here also at the same time. Work on that because, you know, as we talk about moving forward, one of the keys is the tools in our toolbox is understanding tribal sovereignty and recognizing the tribal the inherent responsibility of the tribes. Do I do this myself here? Okay. Let me bear with me here real quick. Let me see if I can get it here. Oh yeah, here we go. Got it. All right. Yes. First, I want to also recognize some of my council members and members of a tribe that are here. I have 2 council members here. Juanita Plentyhose, who's our treasurer in Ute Mountain. And also one of our council members, Manuel Hart, who's here with us. And we have our education director, Tanya, who's here with us doing this. And later on today, I believe we have also some other directors who will be also participating in this conference. So again, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here this morning and to be part of this. And I want to say thank you to Ramona and to Irene to be here. And it's an honor to be sitting with them as sister tribes. It's not too often that we get this opportunity to come to see you and to, you know, talk about in front of law students. I shouldn't say a law joke. How many lawyers does it take or attorneys does it take to, you know, change a light bulb? But I won't do that. Okay. But I think the times we're facing is as you, my background and my bio, it's tough. It's easy at times to steer when the seas are calm, but when the storms get heavy and the seas get rough, that's when you find yourself a true character of who you are. And I truly believe that's what's happening in Indian country. And as we experience what's happening, the history of the relationship between the federal government and the states and the tribes. So as I'm hoping by today that we can come together, and I really appreciate those who are here in the audience to participate and to hear, because it's important that we have this dialogue of true understanding of not only the tribes in Colorado, but Indian country as a whole. As many of you know, that the dark chapters of history is really not taught in the education system. And that's the issue that we as tribal leaders, when we talk about education, I appreciate Lieutenant Governor talking a little bit about education, how important it is. And I think that communication and dialogue needs to be expanded. Again, I'm Chairman Gary Hayes from the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe. A little brief history. The Utes were hunters and gatherers and considered like warlike people. We were very protective of our territory, as other tribes were. The Utes originally had 7 bands that were situated in Colorado and Utah. The Weemanooch Band, which we're a part of, is known as the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe. We're situated in southwest Colorado. In southern eastern Utah, we have a little community about 12 miles south of Blanding called White Mesa, who's part of our tribe. And we have lands in New Mexico also, just north of Aztec. Again, as was mentioned, the original Ute territory. In the 1870s, you can see decline of our lands. And the present territory today is, as you can see in Colorado, it's not that wide, but it's you have an idea of what our lands are down in the southwest corner of Colorado. Again, for Ute Mountain, here, our trust lands, we have about nearly 600,000 acres. Again, here's our reservation, the Southern Utes. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the White Mesa area. In 1880, Chief Ouray and other Utes traveled to Washington, D.C. Numerous times they went there to negotiate treaties, a treaty that would result in removal of, as it was mentioned by Irene, Chairwoman Cuch, about the White River and Carpenter Utes from Colorado to Utah, to the Uintah Basin. Shortly after that, Chief Ouray passed away after this trip. But as you can see, the Chief Ouray is here, but here's our Chief Ignacio, who also was in part of that delegation that went to D.C. And this is a quote that's over there at as Irene Cuch, as Chairman Cuch mentioned about the Meeker Massacre, that we went there for the celebration of extracting a tree from the White River National Park there. And there's a museum there. And here is a quote from Chief Ouray. And it's interesting how what his perspective and what he had done. And and I want to read this. I realized the ultimate destiny of my people. They are to be extirpated by a race that overruns, occupies, and holds our hunting grounds, whose numbers and force, with the government and the millions behind it, will in a few years remove the last trace of our blood that now remains. We shall fall as the leaves from the trees when the frost or winter comes, and the lands which we have roamed over by countless generations will be given over to the miner and the plowshare. In place of our humble teepees, the white man's towns and cities will appear, and we shall be buried out of sight beneath the avalanche of a new civilization. This is the destiny of my people. My part is to protect them and yours as far as I can from the violence and bloodshed while I live, and to bring both into friendly relations so that we may be at peace with one another. And this is when he talks about the protection of our people and the relationships. This is what it's all about, forums like this, to educate ourselves, that we be able to recognize and understand the relationship that we have and how important it is. Because as the theme of this conference, remember your past, the present, and the future, you remember remember that so you won't repeat the same mistakes that you've done in the past. And that's what's really important. And I'm hoping that by this type of forum, we can be able to move forward. Again, the beginning of the dark chapters of the First Nations, the doctrine of discovery is a big issue, that the European nations claim legal title by discovery. Basically, if you don't use it, then you're going to lose it. Indian tribes will grant a right of occupancy, which, if you look into the doctrine of discovery and where that come from, but I won't get into details about that. But it's interesting how it came about, how Spain utilized it not only for the Americas but other countries throughout the world. In the U.S. Constitution, and specifically in Article 6, it talks about all treaties made or which shall be made under authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land. It's very interesting as you look at the Secretary of State and the Department of State, that there is a division there called treaty enforcement. And if you look in and you click on that, they have over 300 treaties that are there that are with other nations around the world, but there's not even one treaty with the Native Americans in that. So those are the type of discussions that we should have with the State Department in ensuring that if this is true, Article 6, then this is where they should be fulfilling the treaty responsibilities and the trust responsibility that they have. Even included is the Commerce Clause. The Congress shall have power to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with Indian tribes. So basically what we talked about, as Lieutenant Governor alluded to, was about the relationship parallel, a government-to-government relationship. Treaties with the United States government. there were over 389 ratified Indian treaties with the United States. The promises vary from each of these treaties to permanent homelands, protection from encroachment, law and order, health, education and welfare, hunting and fishing rights. The Ute history. In 1598, that's when the Spanish began trading with the Utes. As you can see, as we move down, the first treaty made was in 1849. That was made in Abiquiu, New Mexico. At that time, it was just to acknowledge the U.S. government as a government and dealing with the relationship with the federal government. As you can see, we continued moving forward as the invasion, or the trespassing, I would say, of the settlers when gold was found, specifically like in 1873. The gold and silver rush occurred in the San Juan Mountains, which resulted in the Brunot Treaty that Chairwoman Cuch had mentioned, which at that time, when you look at that history, our leaders at that time went to the federal government and asked them to enforce the treaty. But because of political pressure and the local pressure, they decided that, well, we need a new treaty to give us those lands. And in 1879, the Meeker Massacre occurred. That's when another treaty was, in 1880, which cited lands and established the reservations that we currently have today. And in 1888, it was ratified, and it was because there was some issues there regarding the land and moving all the Utes out of the state of Colorado. But in 1888, Congress ratified it and said, we'll make it permanent. So that was enforced in 1888. And the Hunter Act, this is where the two bands of the Southern Utes had divided up, which has permanently established the Southern Ute Reservation, because at that time, the Weemanoosh Band was considered part of the Southern Utes. In 1868, because of the land allotments, that's when half of the tribe decided not to accept that. And so the Ute Mountain Utes, the Weemanoosh Band, moved to the western end of the reservation. And currently today, our land is communal, a community land. There's no allotted land on our lands. And again, in 1940, we adopted a constitution. And it was mentioned earlier with Ernest House Jr. here that Chief Jack House, our last traditional chief of the Utes, passed away. And then what's significant at that time, even back then in the 1950s, Chief Jack House was always advocating for water rights for our people. It wasn't until the mid-'80s that we actually start having water delivered, actual infrastructure delivered for water that was treated. Before that, we used to have a truck that would come down and actually deliver water, and you would have to have your jugs, and they would come around to each of the houses and fill your water for drinking water. Today, we have made significant progress, just as the Southern Utes and many tribes throughout the Indian country. We're the largest employer in the Montezuma County. And as Lieutenant Governor mentioned in his comments, was that the Ute tribes have significant enterprises then and job opportunities for not only our tribal members and other natives, but other non-natives. And here are a list of our enterprises, what we have. We have a construction company, we have a farm and ranch enterprise, we have retail centers, a travel center, one in Toyac and the other one in Utah. We have our Ute Pottery, that was our first enterprise in the early 70s. We have a casino / resort, and we have a Ute Mountain Tribal Park that is probably comparable to Mesa Verde. I know that Lieutenant Governor and some of you probably have visited that area, and we try to maintain as much as we can to preserve it. Again, our construction company was created in 1985. We've done significant work. One of the big projects that we were able to complete was the Lake Nighthorse Dam project. That was done by our construction company. Senator Pete Domenici said that there's no way an Indian tribe could be able to complete that. We did it on time and within budget. And that's when we talk about resources for tribal people, for tribal nations. Give us the resources. We know what we can do and our capabilities. And as we talk with other federal employees and congressional representatives, you know, the climate that we're in, the environment we're in with this fiscal and economic crisis, you would call it, I mentioned to them, I said, welcome to Indian country. This is what has been going on for decades in our communities. So it's nothing new for us. Again, as I mentioned, the ALP dam project and our farm and ranch enterprises, it was recognized last year as the Tribal Enterprise of the Year in our Reservation Economic Summit last year in Vegas. And we've won first place in yielding in the state of Colorado and third nationally. 2 retail centers, our pottery, and our resort. So we invite you to come down and donate. And if you get a chance, come on down. And again, we have our tribal park. And if you ever again get that opportunity to come down, we'll be more than happy to give you a tour of that. And we always go back to the legal basis for the federal services. These are the different acts, statutes, and executive orders that were passed and implemented. But as you can see by the lady holding up the signs, the broken trust of healthcare and treaties, and regarding that treaties should be the supreme law of the land. I want to just kind of go a little bit here, what we're facing today, specifically for BIA and IHS, the Indian Health Service. As you look at the funding from 2004 to fiscal year 2013, you can see the percentage of increases. Which is interesting is how significant these increases have been happening for the last 10, 15 years, 13 years. But look at BIA. Right here, this is what we always say. This is not dealing with fish or land, it's dealing with people. It's really dealing with the responsibility of BIA and fulfilling that trust responsibility. This has significant impact in our communities, from law enforcement to roads to education, all these programs that are important to our communities. And again, we appreciate the President Obama's understanding and willingness for, he's the first president who has ever met with tribal leaders consistently every year. And he's always made a promise that he will recognize and help the Native people to increase the quality of life and the quantity of life in parity with the population, with the normal population that many of you enjoy here today. But as you can see, the decreases. And as you can see, we kind of closed that block, but we're still in a hole. And as you can see, as we mentioned about healthcare, the mortality rates, the disparity rates of diabetes is prevalent in our throughout Indian country. Alcoholism, suicide, and the infant deaths. And we're seeing an increase in cancer also, not only in our reservation, but throughout Indian country. As you can see, the need, as we talk about the unmet need, right now it's about $27.6 billion. 10 years ago, it was about $19 billion. So you've seen that this is a significant increase. And in order for this to give us the quality of health care, we really need to address this issue about the funding that's happening with Indian Health Services. Indian Health Service was established in 1955, and it's in that, just on a side note here, that with this sequestration that has happened, one of the things that was eliminated or exempted from that was Medicaid, Medicare, CHIPS, all these health programs. But one thing they forgot was Indian Health Service. It's important, and as we continue the dialogue and asking Congress to include Indian Health Service, because right now they are going to be cut. As you can see, the disparities of what's occurring in Indian country, it's only going to get worse. As the policy was from the National Health Policy to provide resources, process, and structure that will enable Indian tribes and tribal members to obtain the quantity and quality of health services and opportunities that will eradicate the health disparities between the Indians and the general population of the United States. Causes of death, we see increases in diabetes, tuberculosis, liver disease, and pneumonia. Other causes of death, accidents, homicide, suicide is very prevalent throughout Indian country. These are, in dealing with the government-to-government relationship, each of these branches of government had significant policies and statutes that have been detrimental to Indian country in the past. And today we have executive branch that is favorable to tribes. And we're still working on the legislative side. But obviously the judicial side needs some work. So I appreciate this opportunity that we do need one day Native Americans to be appointed to the Supreme Court, or to be able to have them understand Indian law, tribal sovereignty. That's what's important. If we're going to change the rules of the game, we need to be engaged in that arena. Tribal sovereignty, the government-to-government partnership, the relationship that we have with the state, as Lieutenant Governor mentioned, is open dialogue of communication. It should be held at all levels, from the federal side to state to local governments. As many of us who have grown up on a reservation know that the border town reservations are not kind to us. And we need to be able to change that mindset of the framework of who we are and what we can help in that partnership. And understanding the tribe inherent government authority. With this recent legislation passed of the violence against women, that was a positive step because it recognized finally the tribal inherent government responsibility that we have. And we just need to continue in changing other things to recognize what tribal sovereignty is. Again, state governments need to work cooperatively with tribes, and we have that relationship. And we're just very fortunate in the state of Colorado to have that type of dialogue where many tribes throughout any country don't have that. The future, I met Senator Daniel Inouye, and he was proactive and he wanted his Native American bank he really pushed that. And many of us met with him. We met at the American Indian Museum, and he stressed how important, and as he mentions here, as he stated, I cannot think of anything, not anything that's more critical to your past, to your present, and to your future than your sovereignty. So I just wanted to share that with you, and thank you for this opportunity again, and thank you again for the University of Colorado for this opportunity to be here this morning. Thank you very much.
Mike, when I said hello, my relatives, because in a way we're all related. The Creator made us, so we're all related. My name is Ramona Eagle. I am from the Kapota Band of the Southern Utes. Throughout my life, I have served the Southern Ute tribe in various capacities. I even worked for the Ignacio School District too as a teacher's aide. So I understand some of the issues that Lieutenant Governor talks about, our children learning in the school system. My employment included working in a finance department, serving as the Tribal Employment's Right Director, several years in our casino as the HR Director, and then serving on Tribal Council going on my third term. In 2008, I was elected as a Tribal Treasurer for our Southern Ute tribe. I am subbing for Chairman Newton, who could not make it today, so please bear with me. And I'd also like to acknowledge our tribal member, Miss Shelley Thompson, who's sitting here. If you would just raise your hand, Shelley. She was also a student here at CU Law. And also our staff who is here. About 4 years ago, the Southern Ute tribe decided to develop our own law department within the tribe, and I'd like to introduce our law director, Mr. Monty Mills, two other attorneys, Laura Lynn Hall and James Washenwatok, as well as our outside attorney from Maines, Bradford and Ship, Mr. Sam Maines. Welcome to Ute Country. The conference was born out of a discussion that took place at the CCIA meeting in 2012. The conference presented a unique blend of Colorado's longest continuous residents, the Southern Ute and the Ute Mountain Ute tribes, as well as our sister tribe from the Uintah and Ouray Reservation in Utah, along with our various attorneys and staff and the faculty from CU Law Indian Law Program. We at Southern Ute have had a long and productive relationship with CU Law. Many of our CU Law professors, including Rick Collins, the late Dean David Getches, and Charles Wilkinson, all worked on various projects for our tribe. For example, when the tribe sought to confirm our reservation boundaries and jurisdictional authority in 1985, Professor Collins provided some critical statements in legislative history, upon which we still rely on today. As many of our attorneys hold degrees in CU law, although few are young enough to have attended this law school in this beautiful building, which was built just recently, and it is beautiful. For us, therefore, this conference is simply another step in our long relationship with CU law. And we sincerely appreciate the opportunity to have a conference about such an important topic here. This conference promises to be important not just for those of you who are unfamiliar with the Ute tribes and our history in Colorado, but also for us as tribal officials and our staff. We also enjoy hearing from those who come from our sister tribes, especially on issues where we share interest, like natural resources, relationships with our state counterparts, water rights, and the like. We invited our tribal staff both to be present here and to listen to the topics and the discussions over the next few days. Promise to be informative, even for those of us who are centrally involved with these issues every day. As you can see from the agenda, we will start a discussion of our history in Colorado, and I'm looking forward to listening to Professor Wilkinson and responding to some of his comments and remarks. We at Southern Ute are heavily involved in both the recent reauthorization of the Violence Against Women's Act and the ongoing Indian Child Welfare Act pending before Supreme Court. Both topics that Jennifer Whittle will cover at lunch. Following lunch, the discussion on tribal natural resources, which includes folks who have been working in these areas for decades, promising to be engaged. Last for today, we always hear from our relative, Ernest House Jr., who despite his youth have been helpful to ensure Colorado and its Ute tribes to have one of the strongest state and tribal relationship. I like to say that, and I don't know if Ernest knows this, but his great-grandmother and my great-grandmother were sisters. So, you know, and many of us are related. I'm related to Juanita, I'm related to Gary, related to many of the Ute tribes that don't live in Southern Ute. And we know who we are related to because our parents consistently informed us, this is your relative, this is who you are related to. And that's quite important so that we can build that relationship, we can build the strength that the Ute people must have today in order to accomplish the struggles and the things that come before us. In conclusion, thank you for allowing me to offer these opening remarks, and I look forward to sharing the next few days of interesting discussions with you. I also wanted to say that both the council chairmans talked about the tree that was taken up to the White House. And my mother was the one that was actually named after the Christmas tree, so it was quite a surprise for her, and she enjoyed that. So thank you for all the youth people who got involved with that project. It was very good for our youth people to get together on one particular project and to go forward so we could be recognized at the national level. Thank you.
Thank you all for the incredibly moving and informative and wide-ranging remarks. It's truly a great beginning for our conference. We do have 10 minutes or so for Q&A if anybody would like to ask a question. And I don't see the traveling mic. We'll try to get that, but if you do have a question, just want to raise your hand, I'll call on you. Yes, Kimberly.
So I'm curious about the exercise of treaty rights off the reservation today, and what kind of treaty rights you're exercising, and if there's conflicts and things like that.
I will, well, and maybe the Bruneau Agreement is the one we've spent the most time talking about at CCIA, and it's something that goes back a long time, and it has to do with hunting and fishing rights. And so I'll just start the conversation, but I'm sure the tribal chairs have a lot more to say about this. Because there have been some recent changes to it just in the last several years as we've entered into memorandums of understanding with the tribes. Because what was clear through the Bruneau Agreement were that there were rights that could be exercised on tribal lands, but it wasn't very clear on historically tribal lands and where could members of the Ute tribes hunt and under what circumstances, what conditions, what restrictions off tribal lands. And I don't know, Chairman Hayes or Chairman Cuch, if you want to address more of the details there. But it's complicated and very interesting, and I've been learning a lot about it myself just in the last couple of years. Chairman Hayes?
As during my presentation, in 1873, that's when the Bruneau Agreement happened. And we continue with the Southern Utes also participating in that treaty. But as we move forward to today, as you can see, the lands that were set aside for that, communities are growing. And the acreage is being taken away. And that's an issue that we are concerned about, is that our hunting rights being decreased. And so that's something that we will continue to work on, and specifically the expansion of it if we can. And we just recently signed the revised version of the Bruneau Agreement to add more species to the treaty, and the state is in agreement with it. And so we're fortunate again to have that type of relationship. But let me just say one more thing that affects all of us as not only our tribes but Indian country, is taxation issue, as you were saying about the treaty rights elsewhere. Well, that's one area that has significantly has some impact on the economic development and as we call the general welfare or the essential government function of a tribal government to provide those services without IRS on our back. It's just recently because of the passing of the Indian gaming in the 90s that now we see more and more of the audits being conducted in tribes, over 200 audits. And you know, the significance, it seems like the tribes want to move forward, take one step forward, you end up with regulations and statutes, you end up taking 2 steps backwards. So those are the areas that many of the tribes have joined together to discuss this issue about taxation.
And let me, if I add one thing that I think is really important about it, especially with respect to the Southern Ute lands, is when we think of Indian country, we think of it as being a specified area, and within it, it's 100% controlled by the tribe. But if you look especially at the Southern Utes, we see what's called a checkerboard pattern, because within the tribal boundaries, there's lots of privately held land. It's not all trust land, and that has really, I think, complicated governance within Indian country, because you can own land as a non-Indian within the boundaries of that reservation.
Thank you. I think we have time for at least one more. And I'll invite the people asking the questions to introduce themselves so we can all get to know each other a little better.
Okay. My name is Walter Johns. I work with Managed Business Solutions. We deal with IT, but one of the concerns that I have, I make a lot of calls with tribes throughout America, and I'm noticing that a lot of these tribes, they're making deals with states and cities and that type of thing. I'm just wondering how that's going to affect our sovereignty. There are tribes that are just signing special deals going directly to the states. And I know over the years, especially when I was younger, that's one of the things that we fought against was that we had to deal directly with the states. And so I see throughout the country that's what they're doing. I just wonder, is that going to be a problem for us in the future or even now?
Would anyone like to take that one? Chairwoman Cuch?
Yeah, I kind of want to mention, respond to this Bruno Act. I have our tribal attorneys, maybe they can elaborate on this, but the reason why I mention it, as I stated, history-wise, the Ute tribe, the Uncapagres, and the White River Utes were in Colorado at that time. And I believe there was a treaty that was made at the time when they were in Colorado. Now, we don't have a treaty in Utah. There was one presented on the Uintah Valley Utes, which are the Uintah band, but that was never ratified by Congress. It should have been ratified. But we, at the time, from my knowledge, there's no treaty with the Ute tribe in state of Utah. We were established by executive order back in 1861 by President Lincoln. So we are an executive order tribe right now. But however, the two bands that were located in Colorado did have a treaty. And that's what we're referring to. So under this Bruno Act, we still declare those areas in Colorado that are part of our ancestral land. We still claim, and there is an historical claim to those lands, not only in a way of, I guess you could say those claims are cultural claims, spiritual claims. We can go back to that. Our elders have been asked whenever the National Forest is developing any projects in Uncapagre National Forest or over in Meeker area. They do ask the elders of the Ute tribe to come over and to see what kind of development's going on, if they would like to make any kind of recommendations. But our elders, when it involved the Uncapagre National Forest, you know what they said? We don't want to go over there unless they want to give the land back to us. That's what they said. We would like to have our land back because they were forced. And if you see that Uncapagre National Forest, it's beautiful. They lost beautiful land that's around Delta, Colorado. And they were removed from there. And my great-grandparents, my dad's side, my dad is Uncapagre. His parents were Uncapagre. Yes, I remember Chief Ouray. He was our Uncapagre. He was the chief of the Uncapagre Utes. But, and his wife, Chipita, was removed along with Uncapagre Utes to Utah. And he lived in Utah, Biddy Creek area, and that's where he died. She died, and they brought her body back. And I believe she's buried in Montrose. Oh, not Montrose, what's the name of that museum? That's where she's buried. But so we do have a significant, important tie with what is our Aboriginal land. So I wanted to bring that out, clarify, since it's our tie, we're asking for the hunting and fishing rights, if that could be restored back to the Ute tribe of Utah. And I think our attorney's been working on that. I know, Jeremy, you want to elaborate on what I'm saying? Our attorney, Jeremy Patterson.
Yes, that's essentially correct. There's two of the bands that are presently located in the Ouray Reservation, both, I think, were signatories to the Bruno Treaty of '73. So that's something we'll be visiting with the state about in coming months to reaffirm the existing rights of those bands as part of the Bruno Agreement. That agreement is currently only extended the privileges under that agreement are only extended to the Ute Mountain and Southern Ute tribe. But we feel it's important that the agreement be honored to include all of the original signatory parties, including the Uncompahgre Utes.
Thank you.
Can I just answer?
Go ahead. Sure. Yes,
Councilwoman
Chairman Hayes.
Wilson? You know, you look at it both ways. You look at it as part of protecting sovereignty, but as part of exercising sovereignty also at the same time. As you look at the government relationship at all levels, it's to recognize because of the shortcomings of the federal government and their responsibility, example, law enforcement, you know, to have cross-deputization, where the lack of officers or tribal officers, in case of emergency, would be able to call the county to be able to respond, and again, when the situation arises, when they're needed, to come down and to assist. And, but that's, I wouldn't say it's giving away sovereignty, it's exercising sovereignty and being able to have that relationship. And I think that sometimes, you know, we can be too protective, but at the same time, we need to exercise it and given that responsibility to, as you mentioned about some of these agreements, you know, Indian gaming, you know, we have the compact with states. You know, where did that come from? You know, pass-through dollars that go from the federal government to the state, to the tribes. Just recently, the Stafford Act would require emergency preparedness, emergency disasters. Right now, they passed it, so tribal governments can go directly to the president to ask for emergency declaration, disaster funds. So that's a significant change in policy. So those are the type of things that we exercise and not to hold back on tribal sovereignty.
Thank you. And this, did you want to add something, Chairman?
Yeah, I'd like to answer that gentleman's question, his concern about the state and the tribes. You know, as Chairman Hayes mentioned, the tribes pretty much know their sovereignty. We are sovereign, and our sovereignty is equal to the states. We are equal. That's the reason why we have our governments. We have our council, tribal business committee, we have our courts. But we have to be very careful when we deal with the states. And because we do not want the states to take over our programs, but we can coordinate with them because there are some funding that goes to the state that includes the Native people in their head count. So we got to make sure those monies go directly from the state to the tribes. And of course, there's funding that goes directly from the federal government to the tribes. But there are some funds that do go to the state and then to the tribes. And the tribes get very little of those funds. So that's the reason why we have to make sure we get our fair share based on the head count. But what the tribes have always advocated for is for all funding coming from the federal government go directly to the tribes. But yes, we can work with the states, but that doesn't mean we're giving up our sovereignty. We still maintain our sovereignty, but work with them because we are part within the state, like in Utah, where, like, there's one congressman used to always say, can't think of his name right now. Maybe you guys, what's his name? He used to say, you know, you Native people are unique. You are a member of your tribe, you're a citizen of your tribe, and you're a citizen within your state, and you're a citizen within the United States. So you are a citizen in three areas, which is unique. And he used to always tell us, I can't think of his name, he's an elder man from back east, I know his name.
Is it Dale Kildee?
Who?
Dale Kildee?
No, it's, no, I can't think of it. But anyway, it'll come to me. But he always says that every time, and I think he was the chairman, he's the head of that committee. What do you call that committee? That he heads up on the congressional side of the Native Americans. He's an advocate.
Was it done yet?
No, no. But anyway, he's always, anytime he meets with the Native people back in DC, he always reminds everyone there that we are citizens of three, that's with the Ute tribe, state of Utah, and the United States. And he always tells us, your sovereignty comes from under the Constitution bylaws, where we have the right, there's a section there about the commerce, Department of Commerce, where the United States can deal with the tribes throughout the country, all tribes throughout the country, and that's what the United States Constitution is built upon. So we gotta always remember we're important, and we can't give up that that's important, unique status we have as Native Americans. We are sovereign. And
Thank
we're
you.
not giving up anything to the state, no way, but we can work with them.
This conversation has brought up some issues that I think we'll examine in even more detail, the treaty issues. Charles Wilkinson's keynote that is going to be just after our next coffee break with Councilwoman Eagle and Councilman Hart's responses, I think will elucidate some of those points. And we have a panel on tribal-state relations this afternoon. Hopefully that will go more to those issues. I want to thank the Lieutenant Governor and Chairwoman Cuch and Chairman Hayes and Councilwoman Eagle for their very fabulous and heartfelt remarks here, and invite all of you to take a break, enjoy some coffee, and we'll come back at 11. Thank you.